Welcome, everyone. It's Kristan Kershaw here and joined by my co-host, Suzanne Kohlberg, in our podcast today, all about yucky juice on Over It. Woohoo! We're finally here, Suze.
So taken us like 15 episodes or something.
I know, right? So yucky juice, what is that, you might say? Well, if you've not heard me talk about it, maybe you have some other episodes to catch up on. And if you haven't heard Suzanne talk about it, maybe you've got some episodes to catch up on. But essentially, it's a healthy electrolyte drink. So in the realm of the work that I do, I focus on minerals and nutrients and helping people to understand what they do in the body and why they're important. And one of the early things that I ask people to start doing is an adrenal cocktail. And so adrenals are little glands on top of our kidneys. I'm not going to get too technical, but it's worth being aware that these little things run so many things in our body. If you've ever had an adrenaline rush, yep, that would be all of you. And had to deal with stress, yep, that would also be all of you. Then those little adrenal glands are working hard for you. And the more stress you have, the more worked out they get. And if you've ever heard anyone say, I've got adrenal fatigue, it's because those little glands can get really overdone, so to speak. And that's when exhaustion and having physical breakdowns, it's heavily involved in our mental health function and so many other things. When you don't have a lot left to give, that's often because your adrenals are really not handling life at that point. So the adrenal cocktail is a healthy way to support those adrenal glands and to help you have a bit more energy in your day. So would you like to give the history? I'm like, so many different things I can talk about right now. Which way do I go? Should I give the recipe at this point, do you think? And then you can give a bit of a background on how it became yucky.
Yeah, if you give the
recipe,
then we can discuss how it's got its nickname.
Awesome. Okay, so it's half the main recipe. There are other variations. I'll talk a bit more about that later. But the main recipe is half a cup of orange juice. So 125 mils. It's a couple of ounces, I think. Whatever it is. Sorry for non-metric. Half a cup though, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and something like Celtic salt or a whole salt, not this table salt stuff. Try and avoid the processed stuff if you can. Just whatever you can source local to where you are. And then potassium you get through cream of tartar. And there are other variations. We'll come back to that later. But the base recipe, 1/4 teaspoon of each salt and cream of tartar and half cup of orange juice. That's it. But it's a bit of an interesting combination, right? And when you first hear it, you might go, not sure what that's going to taste like. Suzanne's lived experience, however, was hilarious because it was not of someone who would have any reference points to be able to say, oh, is that going to taste bad? So, Suze, you heard about it somewhere in what I've shared or a webinar or something, and then you've given it a try, right?
Yeah. So before you go, I just want to ask, because I use the Celtic sea salt, would Himalayan rock salt be all right?
Yeah, it would be. I find that you sometimes get little bits in the bottom because the way the salt is, there's often little grains. Not that it's impure, but some of the bits and pieces, they don't go into solution. So it doesn't
dissolve as well. It's just, I was just curious.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I'm pretty sure, thinking about this, you shared the recipe on a freebie day in a group that we were in.
That would be
and I remember looking at it thinking, oh, that sounds disgusting. Keep scrolling. I'm nothing if not honest, people. And then I saw you either did a webinar or some sort of training that I saw, and you were talking about, the benefits of it, and similar to what you were talking about the adrenals. And I love how you were saying just then how the adrenals get over it. Like, this episode sponsored by the Over It adrenal glands.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, look, where's the harm in trying it? So I was preparing it, and then my then 3-year-old came in and was like, can I have some? Some. He didn't talk much at 3. Casimir more than makes up for it now. And I remember sending you a message going, can I give this to my kids? And you're like, yeah, sure. Just a smaller amount. So I got out a little shot glass and I got some for each of them, and he drank it. And his first statement was like, oh, yucky juice, followed swiftly by, can I have some more? And I think where the thing comes from, like where his initial thing to yucky juice was, is if you see somebody drinking juice, you would imagine sweet, because you have connotations with it. It reminds me of the time I went to Japan and bought a donut. This is a whole tangent, but anyway, donuts with stuff in the center, like in Australia, it tends to be jam filled, so we expect sweet. So here I was in Japan ordering this donut, taking a bite into it. It was bean paste filled.
Ooh. Which is very different to jam.
So yucky donut. But anyway, so he was like, oh, yucky juice, because expecting sweet and getting, savory. But then quickly followed by, can I have some more? Or is there more? Or more, please, or whatever he would have said. And now it's interesting. We have it daily in our household, sometimes twice a day. And it's funny, you were talking about the adrenal response yesterday. At the time of recording this, yesterday we went to the water park, Raging Waters in Sydney, and talked Casimir into his first quite decent water slide. And oh my goodness, he was very stressed. So maybe a second yucky juice today may help with that. But I digress. But how the flavor changes depending on the day, and I hadn't really paid attention. Now I think it's more an adult thing that we just don't really pause to appreciate or notice the taste of things, or maybe it's just me. But Casimir, quite the connoisseur, he's like, some days it's really yucky, like it's salty, and other days it's quite nice. And I remember you and I were just chatting about it. I mentioned his observations to you, and you were talking about how our body responds differently depending on its requirements. So if you want to talk a bit more to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what I do with people is starting to awaken that, because think of an animal out in the wild and they know that they need a certain nutrient. They will hunt for certain things that are in season, or a certain, like, you hear of stories of, I think often in Africa, the elephants will migrate to a certain place to get salt licks or something at a certain time of year, or they know that they need something more at a certain time. And so in our innate systems, we have that, but we don't listen to those instincts a lot of the time. And so a lot of the process of learning about the root cause protocol and the work that I do in one-to-one, or however you learn from me, is, what does my body respond to positively? What is helpful to me? And kids do it beautifully. They will go, nah, I don't feel like it today. I know my little one, when I was doing up the lemon juice version, she would come and just steal my cup and glug it. I'm like, okay, you're a small child. You just drank a whole thing. I guess you needed it. Other days she'd take a sip. She wouldn't want it. And that's been my reference point, luckily, since. It was a very good learning moment. And then with time, I've noticed the same thing. So sometimes you'll see that I'm having a drink out of my bottle, or I'll talk about my magical water bottle that has all sorts of goodies in it, and it tastes sweet, but it doesn't taste right if I don't put the combination of goodies in that's in there. It doesn't taste right. So I know that I've got it where I need it for that point in time. If it tastes, again, it's not sugar sweet, but there's a certain smoothness to it. And I've actually had clients describe it where they've come and they've been using it. They're like, oh, you just described it the same as me. And I didn't, this happened recently. And I'm like, I haven't met anyone else who's noticed it either. But often the same sort of thing will happen with the adrenal cocktails. And we might be more pulled to have more than one per day, a la the example you were just giving. Or there may be something that's going, it could really do with, say, being a bit heavier on the orange juice today. Do it as a bit of a bigger serving or whatever, and it will taste better and our body will be pulled to that. Or it might be, actually, I don't feel like as much orange juice. Sometimes I'll put more water in, and we don't always have orange juice here. I do other variations, but sometimes I'll do soda water with a little bit of the orange juice, and then lots of the salt and lots of the potassium source, because that's what I feel like. And I've tried to lean into that. And I encourage people, because we might need, it's been hot where we are in the last few days. And you just said that you've been at a water park for you yesterday, Suze. So your body's needs at that time and in the day or two afterwards, especially when it's humid and we're sweating a lot, like we have been certainly here. And you were mentioning that earlier to me as well. It's hot. You sweat out more electrolytes. You may need more salt, or you may feel drawn to more potassium. It's such an important way And those little adrenal glands do so well to have. They actually are heavily involved in how we respond to stress responses, but also how our electrolytes flow in and around our kidneys and in our blood, and they help to regulate a whole lot more. So when we're stressed, we lose potassium in particular, and magnesium. So, and the adrenals have a lot to do with that, because it will regulate, and we will lose it through the kidneys as a way to keep everything else kind of going. It's that balancing tilt that happens within the blood. So if we're losing it because we've got stress on, do you know anyone who's stressed?
No.
Anyone?
No.
Most of us don't get enough dietary wise. And so this is just one way to start replenishing, start giving our body. And at first you may not love the taste. And I'd encourage you to not, if it's really revolting to you, don't push through it. Try another recipe or something. But if it's just a bit weird, keep it going for a few days and then see how you go. And you'll probably find the taste will change and that it'll feel more suited, whatever. Try and give it at least 2 to 3 weeks if you can. And then if you stop, notice how you're feeling, because I bet you that you'll probably feel, whether it's you don't sleep as well, whether it's that you don't, you may have stopped getting an afternoon lull that you may have historically had, or there may be some other thing that doesn't seem connected, but it does make a difference.
I don't think I've ever actually articulated this to you before, but I'd be curious to see. So I remember when I first saw you mentioning it, part of the reason was like the salt, like, because, you know, I was like, this is going to taste gross. But the other part is the juice, as in, because I have a dieting history, which, you know, I have worked hard to overcome. But I'm like, if I drink 2 of these a day, that is a cup of juice. And I find it funny. I'm sure I'm not the only ex-dieter who will go out of my way sideways to not have something that's too sugary. But then it's fascinating. But then we'll go and slam a whole block of chocolate or something. And I think this is fascinating because you're often saying our body is craving certain things, usually minerals. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, no, I can't have this juice, or I can't have this avocado, or I can't have this thing, you know, like I'm a good fat, or I'm a good, you know.
Yeah.
But then we'll go and have it in spades or even more of it. Like I remember once, I used to be a weight loss coach. I do boundaries and stuff now. But it always fascinated me, people who would say like bread, like and enjoy like a piece of toast or something, but had been told by a naturopath, dietitian, nutritionist, whatever, bread is evil. So wouldn't have that one piece of bread here and there, but then would go and have like a Big Mac meal and complete with sundae and everything. I was like, isn't it fascinating how we all do it? We're like, I can't have this thing. So do you ever have people come to you funny about the juice part of it?
Absolutely. And that's part of why we have variations. So the juice, I hear people be like, I'm not having the sugar in the juice. So that's fine. Hence why lemon is a good alternative, because there sure as heck is not a lot of sugar in lemon.
I can't imagine trying it with lemon. Like, I think I'd do it with water instead. Yeah, I've had it with water because I do funny about when I need more than 2, I just can't come at that much juice. Like the conditioning is too strong.
Yeah, totally. So we do have alternatives. Lemon juice, like a tablespoon of lemon juice, or a decent lemon, a bigger lemon, half a lemon. If it's some of the little piddly ones that are around, probably the whole one, in with a cup of water. And I find cold water tastes beautiful with the lemon, but I like tart things. Said smallest child will lick lemons and happily just basically suck on lemons, whereas other family members are like, are you insane? They don't like that. What about
lime? I don't mind.
Yeah, lime is fine. Lime is fine too. You just need to change the recipe with more potassium, because those other citrus they have the whole food vitamin C, but they don't have necessarily the same composition when it comes to the potassium. So that's part of why we have alternative recipes. But you're right, as far as half a cup of orange juice. And I just you made me remember as well with what you said. What we want is ideally you to get an orange, and if you've got the capacity, get the orange, cut it in half, use a little squeezy thing, make yourself half a cup of orange juice from a fresh orange, or 2, whatever it takes, depending on, seasonally they're different sized oranges, that sort of thing. But for those who are time poor and capacity to do that, just get one that's got nothing else added. Because I tell you what, if you go out to the shops and you buy a concentrated orange juice, you know, in the little things, and then you put it in with water, the reconstituted oranges, I'm not a fan of that. I think it's been treated in such a way that the nutrients are not going to be as maintained, and you don't know if they've already had bits taken out or whatever. I would much prefer you to get, like, in Australia, the Nudie brand, where it's just oranges in a bottle, no preservatives, nothing else added. Have a look. If it's got ascorbic acid added to it, try and avoid those ones. And there's definitely good options and suboptimal options. So aim for the ones that have got nothing else, and they're around. Every state that I've been in Australia, you can get different brands that do much the same. Aldi has a brand that has nothing else added. I think Coles and Woolies both have Nudie. So go with what you can get. Good is an orange juice with nothing else added, whether it's freshly squeezed out of a fruit or out of a bottle. Better would probably be the freshly squeezed organic. And again, generally, if you can get organic, go for that as the win. And then best would be freshly squeezed organic, that you do, like, where it's really freshly picked off the tree and that sort of thing. But again, you could use freshly squeezed lemons or whatever. You want fresh food that hasn't traveled, hasn't been stored for 6 months or 12 months in a fridge. And you can get lost in the weeds here. But what I'd encourage is get it wherever you can get it. Try and get the best that you can. The big thing I would try and encourage you to do is get one with no additives, no preservatives, none of the crap added, just orange juice, and start with that. I
love that. And I love how you don't let perfect be the enemy of good, because I think what a tripping point for so many people, I know for myself for years, is if I can't do it perfectly, if I don't have oranges that are organic and fresh and, you know, juiced myself, then I'm just not going to do this. And you're like, there are alternatives. And yes, there is a spectrum. And yes, there's things that are going to be, you know, in higher service than others. But in this case, something is better than nothing. So the little steps that you take, and then over time, and I do notice it, as you've said, in the different juices, how it affects the flavor and how my body responds to it. Sometimes when the suboptimal juice is the only one available or whatever, I notice I get like a burning feeling almost in my...
It doesn't taste right.
Yeah, like as soon as I drink it, it's kind of like I feel a burn. Not the good burn, like when you've, you know, working out at the gym, a definitely a bad burn. But yeah, don't let the perfect be the enemy of good, and what you have available. And it was interesting, I was in Coles the other day. I live quite close to the shops here. They now have a juicing station. So they have glass bottles and oranges, and you can like literally make your own juice at the supermarket. Now, obviously, it's probably not going to be the best oranges because, you know, as you said, they might have sat for ages or whatever, but it's going to be better than some processed thing off the shelf. So there's that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would totally opt for that if you had the option and didn't mind, you know, a little bit of time. It's pretty funky to watch those machines do it.
I know. My kids are like, can we do it? And I'm like, totally. It was out of order, unfortunately. But I was like, as soon as this is back, we will totally do this, rather than, because we just buy the Nudie one or whatever you said that, you know, but making our own, why not? It sounds like fun. And then not having to clean it up afterwards, even better.
I know, right? Of all things, little side kind of wandering track, I did a presentation, like a workshopy thing, where we did multiple day seminars to train people in the area that I work, back in, I think it was about March 2019, early 2019 at any rate, Feb March.
Before the plague.
Before the plague. And at the venue, they had one of these juices in the back of it. And you should have seen the platters of food that they did for this. Like, the chef that they had did amazing, which suited us beautifully because, of course, our focus is all on fresh food, locally sourced, whatever. It was in the Northern Rivers kind of district of Northern New South Wales, so it's a lot easier to get that sort of thing. But they had one of these juicing machines, and it was just so magical to sit and watch this thing slicing, squeeze, and we could just have as much literally just squeezed orange juice as we wanted. So
that is so cool. Fabulous. I'm going to Coles after this. I have to see if it's up and running. I'll take a little video for you.
Oh, that would be awesome.
So if my other question would be, and I'm not sure if we covered this already, how would somebody know if this was a step they wanted to start adding to their daily regime? You know, regime.
That thing. It would... I think basically most people would do well for it, to be honest. I've seen people go, oh, do you do it for a while and then do you stop? Some people do. I would say most of us live such a fast-paced life that finding a recipe that works for you is really key, because without looking at anyone's stress levels individually, without looking at any of that side of things, most of us don't get enough electrolytes in the first place. And we really, really need those electrolytes in order to function normally, to have optimal brain function, to have optimal everything. Do you need juice every day? No, not necessarily. And I'm all for the alternative recipes. I take a whole food vitamin C 9 times out of 10, probably 9.5 times out of 10. I've recently been away and I came back and hubby had juice and I'm like, okay, awesome. It's unusual, but okay. So I just take that whole food vitamin C, and in the soda water, we just do plain gassed soda water from our soda stream. We just put in the salt and sufficient of the potassium to make up the recipe. We'll make sure that the link to the recipe goes in the show notes for today. But the orange juice does give you some of the potassium, as I've mentioned. So you just need to up that and use one of the varied recipes to help you. But it's basically a whole food vitamin C, which I'll come back to why I'm talking about that in that way, not ascorbic acid in a minute. Salt, the 1/4 teaspoon, that doesn't change. And then the last one is, instead of 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, you would swap it to be 3/4 teaspoon. And that would cover the orange juice side of things. And so that could be that you swap in lemon or lime juice, and then you just adjust the salts that way as a perfectly viable thing. If someone's starting and they're not sure on any of these things, do it in the half quantities or guesstimate. Don't get lost on exactly, oh, my 1/4 teaspoon was a bit on the low side. Is that okay? It'll be fine. Just do something. I probably wouldn't do much more than a 1/4 teaspoon of the salt, purely because, especially while you're not used to it, that's going to be really salty. But again, sometimes hubby and I here, Queensland, in summer, it's hot, it's humid. If we've been outside doing a lot, we're pretty generous. We can actually end up with 3 or more fairly generous serves per day, just to offset what we've lost in sweat and activity and whatever we might be doing outside. So, but that's just come with time. And don't expect to know all the answers to begin with. Just pick something and go with it as predictable. To the other thing that you sort of raised is, I'd give it a go. See how it resonates. As I mentioned before, give it 2 or 3 weeks at least. And if you can manage it to be a little bit more mindful of how you're feeling, whether you want to write it down in a journal, whether you want to write it down in your phone or whatever, on how your mood is, how your sleep is, whatever the thing is that's in your life that is not ideal. Often it's people get tired during the day, and so they're seeking something there. They may have trouble getting to sleep, have insomnia, or generally just crappy quality sleep, or whatever your thing is, or things. If you've got multiple aches and pains and whatever's going on, try and keep it just a very basic note of what it's been like and what's happening day to day. And after a few weeks, you'll probably find that that will actually start to change in some way, hopefully to ease up, hopefully not to get worse. But then if you choose to not continue it, keep doing the diary or the journaling or whatever, and see if you notice something, because you'll probably find that there's something that's been helping and you just don't realize until you don't have it anymore.
I think that is such a magical point to make, because so often we start something in response to an ache, a pain, a lack of sleep, a poor quality sleep, something that you said, many examples. And then over time, we have a shift in that and we forget. So I know for myself personally, I have, and I was talking to you about it, I have chronic back pain, which, is well managed. At the moment, it's flaring up. And when my back is flaring up, everything annoys me. But you forget all the little things when you're outside of it. So if you start yucky juice, or you start changing some of your minerals and you start to feel better, so many of us inadvertently stop the thing that then made us feel better. And the thing is, we don't instantly feel worse. Like, there's still residual, the body's still holding on to the memory and stuff. And then depending on the time, you start to, like, we recently went away and I didn't take the supplements, the vitamins, and the whole food vitamin C. I want you to speak to that in a second, rather than what were you saying, ascorbic
acid.
Yeah, speak to that, please, because I'm curious.
Yep. Well, you finish your thing and I will come back to that. So you went away and you didn't take it.
I didn't
you
take
felt
it.
pretty rough afterwards, right?
And I felt pretty rough afterwards. And the thing is, sometimes when I start taking it again, I feel better almost instantly. Like, I remember one time I was telling you, and I was like, my body was like, it was like, yes, it's back. And other times it's a little bit of a rougher re-entry into having the thing again. Your body it's not so predictable like that. But I was talking to you too about when I went away, how much I was craving more like Coke, the caffeine, like, and it was like, because the salts and stuff in the drink, the body doesn't understand what the cravings are. And, and especially in the humid days, and you were saying, like, yesterday at the water park, there was the stress of, like, I'm not the biggest thrill seeker, but, the waiting and lining and queuing and then dealing with the kids and all that stuff, and the traffic. There's all these little things that are little, like, chips away at our body's reserves, and we don't tend to top them up.
No. And this is a big part of, broadly, like, the bigger picture of what I do, but the adrenal cocktail is a perfect way to just start chipping away at something that can help us in our day-to-day. And the other exciting thing with why people would want to start the adrenal cocktail is it helps us to be able to metabolize magnesium optimally. Many people, if they don't have enough electrolytes available and they're in stress mode and whatever, they need magnesium desperately. But sometimes they can, if you've ever had magnesium and you felt worse, like you felt really tired, and not just, oh, I'm going to bed early because magnesium's helping me to get sleepy, but a really zonked kind of tired after having magnesium. Firstly, it can be the type of magnesium. That's a discussion for another day. But generally, it can be because your body needs the electrolytes. And when you've got those electrolytes in place, magical stuff happens with regards to how the magnesium can help you both to sleep deeper and better and to have more energy during the day. So it's actually a starting stone of other things in other ways as well. But for most people, it's a beginning point to feeling stronger and more resilient and that sort of thing. So
I love that. And now the ascorbic acid.
The ascorbic acid versus whole food C. So this is really interesting. Might get a little technical, but try and stick with me even if you don't love science. So most of us have been told throughout our life, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, same thing. Now,
and is that, can I ask what you mean by that? Is that the little orange ones you put under your tongue and they dissolve? Is that what you're talking about there?
Bingo. Yep, exactly. And you can get different forms of ascorbic acid, like it can be as ascorbic acid, you can have sodium ascorbate. There's a few different forms which essentially are doing the same sort of thing from a chemical point of view. They're not exactly the same structure, but they're known collectively to be either ascorbic acid or to do similar things in the body. Now, the challenge is when you get vitamin C in nature, it's not just ascorbic acid. It's actually a whole food vitamin C molecule that has different components. So the ascorbic acid is a shell, and on the inside, you've got cofactors which help that to do its thing in the body. Many animals actually make their own ascorbic acid and then will pull other nutrients from their food and that sort of thing into the complex and be like that. But humans, guinea pigs, and something or other else, there's another third thing, can't make our own. So we have to consume it. Whole food vitamin C has tyrosine in the middle and as a part of that whole food component. And in the center of that, you've got copper. You need copper in your diet. Most of us do not have enough copper. If you've ever been told that you're copper toxic, I would challenge you to say that you're out of balance and that your body has likely had an external factor of not being able to metabolize the copper optimally. What we want is bioavailable copper. And so when it comes in the whole food package, it's coming delivered to you in your food in such a way that it's more usable and it's more bioavailable for the body to utilize it. Ascorbic acid, when we take that into the body, it needs to grab the other parts from elsewhere in your body, metabolically speaking. And so you can actually emphasize a copper deficiency by reallocating the nutrients to deal with that sodium ascorbate or the ascorbic acid or whatever. So As a part of the root cause protocol, we encourage people to avoid ascorbic acid wherever you possibly can, whether it's taking the pretty orange tablets or in food. It's commonly used as a preservative and across all sorts of things, from chips to, like, as in crisps. You'd be surprised where you'll find ascorbic acid in tinned beans or tinned tomatoes or whatever. Heaps of our foods have got ascorbic acid as a natural, in quotation marks for those not watching the video, a natural preservative. Now, worth being aware that a lot of the stuff that's used in food sciences is not an extract from food as such. It's actually a biochemical process. It's all manufactured. And I, for one, do not want the manufactured version of anything in my body if I can possibly avoid it. I'd much rather the food complex, because our bodies respond very differently to food-based complexes compared to synthetic manufactured stuff.
That was so well articulated, and I love that. Thank you. Because, we are often told things like, copper toxic, or I've heard you talk about zinc before. I'm sure we can have a whole series of episodes. Magnesium too, the type of magnesium, like you're like, go have this, and then I have this and it upsets my stomach, or I have this and it upsets my sleeping. And it's like, the way that it is absorbed by the body and the way it's utilized. And you were saying with the ascorbic acid, if it needs a carrier or something else to activate it, so it's going to draw from that, it's going to deplete. It reminds me of that, what is it, like rob Peter to pay Paul? Like, I'm going to take from here to do this, but then as a result of that, we have something else to make up for that, and something else, and becomes a cascade. And then as soon as we take out one of these things, what was it in line for? So it is, I love the way that you described that, so that it can be most useful. And then the bioavailable copper, because I know, and I'm sure we'll do an episode on, I know we've done interviews on it before about, iron deficiency and, actually being iron overloaded, but not for it to be utilized by the body versus, it just kind of reminds me of the image that comes to mind is, say you're dying of thirst and you're standing next to the ocean. It's like, that's useless. You can't drink it.
Yep, absolutely. And the cascade, the words that come to mind here are unintended consequences. You might take ascorbic acid because you feel like you're getting sick or whatever, and someone said take some vitamin C and take one of the pretty orange things. Well, you might not get sick then, but I bet you your iron deficiency anemia is going to get worse. The more you take, it's going to make anemia worse. It can make, for women, if you've got bleeding issues where you bleed heavily or long periods or whatever, it can make that worse. Like, it cascades into so many things. The bioavailability of your copper is critical to iron movement in the body, to indirectly creating vitamin D. How many people have you heard say, oh yeah, I'm vitamin D deficient? It's one of the most confusing things that's around, and yet you don't need to take a synthetic one. Please, if you haven't ever heard of that, I can do a later episode, but go and look up the root cause protocol, check the links that'll link to this or whatever. Please do your research before taking it, because it's not as black and white and perfectly peachy to just go take a bit here or there. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot more to it, and it's out in the research. It's just sitting there, but it doesn't make the big companies out there money to promote the healthy food versions of things that can do stuff. So, well,
the healthy food versions, it makes me think. I was watching Kinky Boots. Have you ever watched it?
No, I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it.
So basically, the apparently it was based on a true story, but you never know how loosely based these things are. But this gentleman, his father had a shoe factory, and he inherited it when his father passed away, and he didn't realize how close to broke the company was going. And then he went into some of these stores, and he's like, well, what's happening? Why are you not ordering the shoes? And he's like, look, I can buy a pair of these. And then he goes, you can buy a pair of these and they can last for life. And he's like, exactly. And I'll never get a customer again. But if I buy a pair of these, they're going to come back in 6 months. And you can even see things like that with, like my husband and I have been together 21 years now. Wow, that's a while. We got a microwave when we were first together, which last year I actually had to get rid of because the inside was falling apart. Like I didn't trust the safety, and I don't even get on, but I know some people don't like microwaves. But anyway, long story short, then we got another one to replace it, which lasts like 1 day past the warranty, because people don't make money when things are built to last. And I think, and then people will say to me when I get really passionate and ranty about this, well, why would you want to do the coaching or the work that you do if you don't want people to be with you for life? Like, what's the advantage? I'm like, because there's always going to be more people. There's 8 billion people in the world. Like, how many people are we touching with our work? Like, hopefully, hundreds and thousands with the knock-on effect, but there's still millions and billions of others out there. So when you think about, when you go and take this thing, not knowing that the side effect or the thing is going to draw on something else, so then you go and take that thing, and then you go and take that thing, and you end up with so many things. I don't know, did I tell you what my thesis was about?
Yes, you did.
Do you remember offhand?
It is related to people continuing to take things after they have surgery or whatever, and potentially ending up with like crossing over because they might take a home brand one and then end up double dosing and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's not a very succinct one.
Medication compliance in people over 65 post-hospital discharge. Yep. And what fascinated me is how often would people go to hospital, they'd be given an alternate brand of the same thing and then go home with that and then start taking their own, and how people just don't know and end up doubling up on one thing or missing out on another thing. And I could see it being very similar with this. You're being told, hey, you need to take some vitamin C, so you're going and taking that. And then, oh, you're iron deficient, so you're going and taking that. Oh, you need some vitamin D, so you're going and taking that. And all of these things affecting the other things, and then the cascade effect.
Absolutely. And that's how people get sicker and sicker. And all they're doing, and this loops that beautifully to the becoming aware of self, and what just the adrenal cocktail can begin the process of, because many of us have been seeking and going, I don't feel right. I don't feel like I'm making energy right, or I don't feel that this ailment, insert whatever it is here, I think there's something more to this. And you seek a food, a pill, a therapist, or whatever. You go to an integrative health doctor, or you go to counseling, or you go to whatever. And it's actually a combination of those things. Your body needs whole foods without impact of chemicals, wherever you can possibly avoid it, which is pretty hard in this day and age. And you really need to find what combination and listen to your body, because your body may be yearning these things and you're going, oh, I'll try that. Oh, I'll try that. Oh, I'll try that. And actually it needs to calm down out of fight or flight mode, which may require, whether it's counseling, coaching, whatever, learning you from that side. But it also actually needs the core nutrients that it's probably been craving this whole time, especially if you crave funny foods or whatever. Colleague used to crave, all of a sudden started to crave pineapple. Now, what she didn't think of at the time, and many people wouldn't know, is that it's actually got natural digestive aids. It's got bromelain in pineapple, and that can actually help with digestion. This person had a lot of food reactions in her history, and that was like super high up there on histamine sort of reactions. So she's like, no. And after about 2 months, she finally went, you know what, I'm just going to buy a tin. And it just tasted so good. She never had any food reaction. And she realized at that point, firstly, she'd come a long way. And that secondly, the brain over body factor, but her body was trying to give her that message, and it's a food-based thing. And so she's used that, and we've each used our equivalent of that since, to go, while I was away, what do I really feel like for breakfast? I could feel myself hunting. I only had so many food options in the little fridge that I had. And I did one breakfast, and it just didn't hit the spot. I was just kind of peckish for something all day. And I was really trying to lean into this premise, right, of my body's calling for something, and know that it's not been satisfied by what I've had so far. In the end, what I did was I'd been making a little heated up muesli sort of thing on the stove. And then I had something or other else. But the next day I had a small piece of gluten-free bread and an egg, as well as the muesli. Instantaneously, my body was just like, oh, and it was happy. It's what I'd been hunting for, is a little bit more dense nutrients and I'd tried all sorts of healthy things and maybe some not so healthy things the day before, and it just never hit the spot, but that just solved it. So
and
again,
I think
full
the
circle,
other thing,
right?
she says, nearly kicking her light over, that people can overlook or whatever is the simplicity of it. And I think, sometimes maybe because that's what we've been sold, or maybe because that's what's in the mass media, that, it needs to be quite complicated. Yeah. The yucky juice, the adrenal cocktail, is simple. Juice, 2 different types of salt, the end.
Yeah.
And the effect that small change can have on your body, on your energy levels, on your sleep, on, you know, pain, on that kind of thing, is incredible. But it's something you kind of have to experience to, you know, we can tell you. It's like that. I remember a coach saying to me once, you can read all the books about how to ride a unicycle, you can watch all the YouTube videos about how to ride a unicycle, but the way you're going to learn to ride a unicycle is to get on and start pedaling. So you can listen to us, you can read all the recipes, you can look at the case studies, you can do all this stuff, or you can be like, okay, I'm going to get myself some juice and a couple of bits of salt, and I'm going to try and see how my body responds. And then the different variations that you have available on your site, because I know the one I have now is slightly different. I've dropped out the cream of tartar for something else that you recommended. And that's the other thing too. If you do want that bit of hand holding, no shame or shade, I'm a hand holder person all the way. Contact Kristan or her team. Kristan's got Supporting Balance, other members that work with her. I know you guys do a 15-minute complimentary consultation, and then from there get the support. And there's other things that you can do, hair analysis, and you know, step by step to making, like I say, be even more you, not a cookie cutter version or have all these things, but what's actually going on in your body and how does your body respond to these, you know, little interventions.
Deciphering the signals that may be right there and that you're just not aware of. And we talk on you and get specific to you. A lot of the building blocks are going to be in common across many different people, but finding your combination of what order makes sense and what swaps you might need and all that kind of the personalization of it, and understanding how your stress response connects with your minerals. It's a pretty powerful thing to help you go, oh, it's right there. It's right under your nose.
100%. And we'll put the links for that in the show notes. Anything else you wanted to say before we finish up?
No, I think what an awesome little episode covering such diverse stuff, not just the yucky juice, but a whole lot more relating to,
every episode we record, I think we open up about 5 more we want to do, because now I'm like, okay, we need to do something about iron, we need to do something about magnesium, we need to do something about what did you say, vitamin D, and then we didn't mention it but came to mind was B12, like all these sorts of things. Like it's just kind of, and I think when you start a personal development journey, like looking at your minerals, looking at your base constituents thing, it can be a bit like that. It's like, oh, okay, I started it because I was feeling a bit tired or I was feeling a bit in pain or this. And then once you have that thing addressed, it can open the door to go, oh, like what else is more available here? And sometimes people will be like, well, what's the point? There's always going to be something else. And it's like, well, I don't know about you, but you can sit around spinning and having the same old problem forever. Or you can be like, oh, what else is there?
Oh, for sure. Like when I started this in 2014, well, really, I started magnesium in 2013 and started to edge towards this by 2014. I had no idea that in my early 40s, I would be a healthier me than what I've ever been throughout my entire life. I've never been so free of pain, able to sleep deeply, restoratively, work long hours. Probably not so proud of that one, but at the moment, that's my reality. But I can do it without burning the candle at both ends and ending up constantly sick or constantly in a tailspin. Like my family are really collectively quite chilled. The teenagers cope with school. Like I could never have predicted that my own personal health from a hormonal point of view, I've had ongoing hormonal issues. I've had ongoing pain issues, constant severe migraines getting worse with having kids. And food reactions since I was a teenager, which I didn't recognize until probably my 20s. So many things, and they've all disappeared. But they didn't all disappear overnight. It just took time and chipping away and the self-discovery of understanding both nutrients-wise what made me tick, but also metabolically how that connected with my stress response. Pardon me.
That's actually a great point that I hadn't even considered. And this is the thing about the small sustainable changes that we always talk about on Over It. I used to suffer from cluster migraines. So I haven't had a cluster of migraines in that I can remember past, and how much of that is from the small changes and the things like the daily yucky juice, because I remember they used to plague me, and when I get them, I'd be laid up for however long until the cluster passed. And yeah, I haven't had that. And the thing is, you forget when it's not front of mind, when you're not experiencing it. I think that's the thing. When you make small changes, the things go away. They're not front of mind. And sometimes we do forget. And that's why for anybody who's listening, if you have done the yucky juice or whatever other tool that you've been using, journaling, tapping, anything like that. Like for me, another one, before we hit record, I'll throw myself under the bus. I was saying to Kristan, I was still feeling a little bit cranky, and I'm a little spicy if you listen to, might be a number of weeks ago now, because we tend to put our episodes out of order. And you were saying, like, is there anything that you're missing? And I've been looking, I was thinking at the time about, like, I've been having the juice, and I've been taking my, whole food vitamin C and whatever. My own journaling kind of dropped that out. So it's like, for me, that's like the mental shower, getting all the stuff out of my head and onto the page. So when we stop something, there can be a consequence, maybe not immediately, but then it shows up somewhere else. So and it's never to beat yourself up and go, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person in the world. It's like, oh, hello, that little thing, that 10 minutes a day that I spend in my journal has effects so much forward. And same with the juice or whatever it is that you're working on. When you drop it, just pick it back up, add it back in, and notice. And I loved how you suggested to the listeners, keep a journal so you can look at outside, sleep, energy, all sorts of things that can be contributing from this one small change.
For sure. Awesome. Well, let us know how you go. We love hearing from you wherever you've listened to, watched this, whatever. If you can comment. If not, you can drop us a line on social media or wherever. Drop us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And I look forward to doing another one of these very soon.
Until the next one. Thank you, everybody. Bye.